Right now I'm bicycling down Sleeping Child Road where we were 3.5 weeks ago, and when I took that ride I said this turnoff is the turnoff to Old Darby Road, and when we get there we're going to go that way is the plan. You can see the Bitterroot River there. It's flowing pretty full, and we don't have a really great view of it right here through the trees, but on this ride we will have a lot of good views of that river. So here's the division in the road. If we continue that way, that would be continue to be Sleeping Child where we went on that trip, and here Old Darby Road. So we're going to see what's down this road after I stop and drink some water. You can also probably see, compare this to what this looked like 3 weeks ago, how much fuller the trees are. We are in high spring, almost summer here. So over there, you can see this old red house, which as far as I know is abandoned. Was at least abandoned 12 years ago. I think this is the first time I've seen it since then. Actually, it's still in pretty good structural repair, considering like 12 years ago it was abandoned. And I think that's a pretty original farmhouse in this area. So that might be 1880s, 1890s. And right here we have a little dip down. We're going to cross the actual Sleeping Child Creek, which of course, remember, going up Sleeping Child Creek. This bridge here is where it enters into the Bitterroot River. And a little bit past here, there's a little bit of a climb, and then the road turns to gravel. There should be a lot of traffic here, but I might be surprised by that. There's the Sleeping Child entering the Bitterroot. Okay, I'm going to put my camera down. I'm going to go into a climbing gear right here. That was kind of a steep climb, and I'm not done. One thing here you can see is one of the canals that takes water from Lake Como, where we're not going today, but we're going towards there, and brings it to the Bitterroot. And this is an access road. This is not authorized, and in fact, I often see people using this as a place to walk their dogs, but I obey those signs. So past that initial first climb, the road is still climbing. It'll do some dipping and diving and rising and raising and rousing. But as far as I remember, that initial climb was the doozy, and from there it's kind of like a little bit up and down, not too hard. At least we'll find out. So this is where the dirt and gravel road starts. And my usual saying about that, you know, even if it makes it harder, it will hopefully mean that there's less traffic here. And then over there, it's also where the good views start. Also, if you look at the plants around here, we have a lot of brushy plants and a lot of ponderosa. So we've already kind of entered a more arid zone. And like I said many times, the microclimates between forest, a covered forest with, you know, lush undergrowth, and something like this, a lot of times it's only a couple hundred feet. Also, livestock and open range, so there might be some mixture of cattle and sheep across the road as we go along. Look at that great view down there. Also past Hamilton, as we enter this part of the valley, you can see the valley kind of narrows down, and there's still room for fields there, but there's a big transition between how wide the valley is as you get towards Darby, and eventually it becomes more of a canyon. And if we look that way, we can see two of the largest peaks in the Bitterroot, El Capitan and Trapper Peak. It's a way, whoa, you probably saw some lightning there. So we're on quite an adventure here. Obviously we're not going that far, but those are places you can go. There might also be a question, why am I riding in a thunderstorm? Was that bad planning? Actually, that was good planning. Or at least I hope it will turn out to be good planning. Yesterday it was pretty hot. It got into the high 80s, and this morning that continued, and I saw in the weather that it would cool off and there would be showers later, so I intentionally went later. And right now, it has to be between 4 and 5, and I will still have at least another 4 hours of daylight, so I'm okay. But yeah, for other people, this might not be the best weather to ride in. So right now we're going downhill, and as is often the case, it's really hard to know until you go back up how much downhill we're going. I mean, the overall direction that we're going is upward to the valley, but I don't know how difficult it will be on the way back. I also don't know how close we are. The road might be shorter than I remember it as, or it might be just as long. I sometimes get confused. Also, I promised good river views, and we haven't seen those yet. I apologize. Hopefully we will see one soon. If you look down that direction, you can see the Bitterroot River. And it's wending and winding, as are we. One other point, this is called Old Darby Road because before the construction of Highway 93, which is down that direction, this was the road to Darby. And at the time, the river might have had a different alignment, might have been harder to build around. And then eventually, at some point, they built the road closer to the river. Okay, well, we're continuing. One other relevant point about that, if you are taking some type of, whoa, there's the rain. If you are taking some type of gigantic bicycling trip from like Missoula to Salmon or, Missoula to Pocatello or something like that, the bike path runs between Missoula and Hamilton, and after that it follows Highway 93. It actually has a pretty nice shoulder, but it's not very relaxing. There's a lot of cars. There are some lumber trucks and stuff turning in and out of the highway. So this road's a little bit more rough, involves climbing and going up and down, but this is the scenic route if you are taking a bicycle tour. And hopefully that's evident. You can see right there, there's Highway 93. You can see cars going by. You can see that cut. And then that valley there, I believe, is Lost Horse. And then on the other side of that would be Lake Como. And those are actually on my list for the summer, but we'll see. But for now, it looks like I'm going down to my final approach to my destination. So I'm actually going to put my camera away because I'm riding down a road. So the cyclist up there passed me. By the way, most cyclists do. So now I'm going back uphill, and it's kind of surprising. And I set myself up for disappointment because I thought I was in the final approach, and then I realized there's one more hill that earlier on might not have bothered me, but I was like, okay, I'm home free. I wasn't. So tip for cyclists, don't just set yourself up for disappointment. But as you can see, we are much closer to the river, and along here is one of the great river views I promised. Okay, just a little bit more of a climb, as I've said many times before. You can see the road is flattened out here. And yeah, my first memory was right that this road is longer. When I started going down, I was like, oh, does it just go up and down? It goes up, down, then it goes up and down, goes flat. But we are almost there. One lane bridge, there we are. So we're crossing the Bitterroot here. So I did reach my destination. Interestingly, in my memories, when I was remembering this, I was like, that's a covered bridge, isn't it? And then I looked and it wasn't. And now I'm visually confirming this is not a covered bridge, but it is an old-fashioned bridge. Actually interesting, I was thinking of, I love to explore Oregon. I don't actually know if there's any covered bridges around here. I'm trying to think if there are any, and I can't think of any. So here's the Bitterroot River. As I cross the bridge, and right there's some river access. That's Wally J. Crawford river access, and we will go and see that either before or after seeing One More Thing. So there is the One More Thing, Old Como Schoolhouse. Right there, that's Highway 93. So Old Darby Road crosses Highway 93 and continues that direction. And usually, or I think all the time when I went to Darby, I would bicycle Old Darby Road. I could also go along 93. It's just a little bit more crowded. So I'm going to look at the schoolhouse a little. So this explains the history of the school. There was an original building here built in 1882. And this was built in 1900 and then lasted as a schoolhouse until 1920, when the area had gotten large enough that it wasn't big enough for its intended purpose. But apparently it's still maintained 100 years later as a community meeting center. And I said this also when we went down Sleeping Child Road and there was a schoolhouse there. This area, Como, which right now is just this intersection and some houses, this used to be an actual community, and there were along the Bitterroot Valley so many little communities that dotted the valley. And that was when, before automobiles and before Highway 93 was built, of course, when, you know, 3 or 4 miles away was a long way. So there was communities probably with a store, church, school, every 3 or 4 miles. And now, you know, the communities are more 10 or 15 miles apart. So that's a little bit of the history of what used to be Como. And there's still a Como area, and there's Lake Como, but this is all that remains of the Como area as far as, you know, institutions or any sign of community. One of the things that said on the plaque was that there was only one line of windows. The opposite wall doesn't have windows because they thought that cross-lighting light from 2 sides was bad for children's eyes when they're learning to read. Interesting idea. You have an old chimney there, probably really important before there was good insulation. And by the way, we've actually come up far enough that, you know, it's going to be a little bit colder here, a little bit different seasons. And there you can see, yeah, there's no windows on that side. So that's an interesting idea. 2 outhouses. There's a woodshed. Nice ponderosa pines. So I don't know what the meeting schedule is like and whether there's still meetings or community activities in there, and who would come here for a meeting when there's not really a lot of houses around, like within walking distance. And Darby is only 5 miles that way. And in a place where people just, you know, take cars for granted, I don't know who would be walking here, or, you know, who would be driving here when you could just go to, you know, Darby or Hamilton or Missoula. So that's an interesting idea, but apparently it's still occupied. It would be interesting to see what goes on in there. And looking through the windows, there is stuff piled up. I am interested. Also, electricity. So that was probably added sometime after 1920, probably in the 30s during the Roosevelt administration, if I had to guess, although maybe not in its current form. Also, that's obviously of interest, an old well or hand pump. I'm assuming that that's no longer in use. There's a lot of cracked and moved stuff, but sometimes I've been surprised in places like this. It's been a while since I talked about this, but we remembered the old Montana Rail Link line, which was an old Northern Pacific line before that through Hamilton. It continues this way, and this road looks like it was recently surfaced. So yeah, I think that when I was here 10 years ago, this was still theoretically a usable rail line. You can kind of see by the edge of that tree that about makes sense. But obviously it is not now. But again, unlike when we were in Turrialba, these are still look like structurally sound. So if for some reason we did want a railroad to go back all the way to Darby from Missoula, probably would not take too long to get it started. And one thing about that, of course, is that this area was a big timber lumber area, and so that was the reason for the railroad. I don't know if Darby quite has the population to, you know, justify commuter rail, but also we might be surprised. It would also make a really nice excursion rail if you wanted to. So I'm just thinking about that, always thinking about railroads, and I'm probably going to head back now. But I'm not going to head back before I talk about Heidegger, which I do every once in a while. So one thing, you know, when I go to community, I kind of see, where is the opening? How does this community have a physical location or a social or psychological location where people can open up, whatever that means, Lichtung. And this kind of, to me, reflects a time when there was a community meeting center in a lot of these places. And now, you know, you have a highway and you have areas and then you have houses that are separated. People drive 15, 20 miles. And what's also interesting about that is actually since I've been back this time, there seems to be a lot more identity. And a lot of it's like a little bit hostile, like not liking outsiders. And some of that's due to, you know, objective things like, you know, housing prices, stuff like that. But also I think a lot of it is as people have lost that real interaction that used to be in places like this, they're kind of substituting it with an identity that is often a simulacron. It's like a little bit of a cosplay or a LARP, I like to say. So when I see things like that, I kind of miss that feeling, and I definitely had that in 2009, that there was like a way that the community could interact and, you know, relate to each other. And it said that like there used to be debates here, and I was just imagining what would it be like if you could have a community meeting place where you could have a friendly, helpful community debate. Probably a lot better than yelling at strangers on Reddit. Maybe not. I mean, that's kind of fun sometimes. So there's some heavy thoughts. I think I'm going to check out at least a little bit of the water access here, the river access. It's actually close to 6 p.m. and as you can see, it's still light out, but it is getting rainy. And there was some ups and downs on that hill, so I do want to get going home. So Wally Crawford fishing access site, pretty basic. There are some parts of the river that aren't fishing access, but it's just like basically down the river. You have an outhouse, stop dumping carcasses, in general good advice. And look how swampy it is right here. Yeah, and it's a big contrast than when I came here just a little bit over 2 months ago when we were still like, you know, things were frozen and dead, and now it's like so lush. There's a picnic table, boat ramp, and this is our river access. River is really high right now, so this is the beach. I think normally, like on the other side of the tree where it ends, and there you can see the old one-lane bridge from there. You know, the way I feel, any river is beautiful river, and on the right day, and I've had other days here, I could probably spend some time just sitting here looking at that river flowing by. But today, I do have to be getting home. Yeah, what else can I say? River is beautiful. Nice scenery. Nice old bridge. I like it. So I hope it's not a slight that I'm only spending a minute here. So, one of many other places to see along the Bitterroot River in Wally County. And now I prepare myself for the big question. Will the trip back be easier or harder than the trip here? So this part where I'm going uphill is a little bit hard, but in general the way back so far has been easier than the way here, or the way there. And both for the uphill and the downhill, this is where having a mountain bicycle has been more helpful than if I was trying to do this on a hybrid or, goodness forbid, road bike. Go home building, you're drunk. Or maybe that's part of the sculpture garden, or made by the same guy as the sculpture garden. And I wanted to point out here, because we haven't seen it from this angle, we've seen it up close and from other angles, but from the south, this is Ward Mountain here. And then that is Roaring Lion Creek between that and that ridge, which is Sawtooth. And from here you can see that Sawtooth is substantially smaller than Ward to the south or Mount Downing to the north. And if you look there, somewhere around there, that is where we took the trail just on Wednesday. And then that's Blodgett Canyon. So that's what all of that looks like. Sometimes it's hard to tell the layout of all these mountains because, you know, you're too close. But hopefully that gets a better picture. And in other words, other news, I have done most of the uphill and it's all downhill from here. And for context, this road, I believe it's about 12 miles from my house to Como. It's about 17 miles to Darby, and I think it's 5 miles past Como. So it's something like 12 miles. maybe closer to 11. So in all, I'm going to do somewhere between 22 and 24 miles, which is not that much, but it's late on a Sunday afternoon, early evening. I have to work tomorrow. And also today has pretty much the perfect weather because we have these long days, but we have clouds and it's chilly, so I'm not getting dehydrated. And then one other part about that is it was raining earlier, and even though it's, you know, getting late in spring, we have long sunlight and the day started out warm, it can get cold and it could get, you know, I could have started to get pelted with freezing rain. So even now, and really all year long, I have to be careful when I go out for those reasons. But from here, it's a pretty straight shot back home. I am not even having to pedal as I go down this road. Okay, and then one other part about that, this is a pretty easy ride from Hamilton. Not one of my most popular rides, but as you can believe, not a lot of traffic, great scenery. So if you are looking for rides, there's a lot around here, and this is one of them. I didn't notice this on the way up, but there's a platform for an osprey nest, and an osprey nest, and an osprey. That's always a good sight, and I'm going to take a picture of that. I'm out by the old house. There's Sleeping Child, where we'll meet Old Darby. And I just wanted to mention I see another osprey nest here. Doesn't look like it's occupied right now, but that could be misleading. Oh, there's some serial number of a pallet. So that's one of the things, sometimes I'll notice this, like I'll go along and I'll notice one thing and then I'll notice it more time. I also don't know what's going on with that tree. It looks partly dead. And I think that is the tree growing there, but that could also be a parasite. No, I think that's the tree. And it is getting dark, so I'm just going to keep on going. I'm back on the pavement, so from here it's a pretty obvious shot home. And at some point I'll have a little bit of a summation. So in conclusion, today we went to Como. Past there are Lake Como and Darby, and both of those places are places I want to go before the summer ends, but we'll see when. And Darby's not that much further, 5 miles further, but it's like, that's 10 miles round trip, that can add up. Anyway, when I first came here, I was basically planning to do trips like 4 or 5 times a week, and just like everything in life, it kind of slows down once you're actually there. I've been working a lot, but by the end of the summer we will see a lot of stuff. But for now, I'm just gonna go home and relax and get ready for work tomorrow.